Hello, all you textual deviants, and welcome to another episode of Texting. I'm Mark Will in Taipei.
And I'm Who in St. Petersburg.
Today, our text will be Amiri Baraka's Somebody Blew Up America. And we've got a nice graphic here that Tomek provided for us. Those of you watching can see that. And let's see. So this is the book in which this poem was published. Is called Somebody Blew Up America and Other Poems. Came out in 2003. So it's kind of the title track for this book. And of course, Amiri Baraka was mentioned in episode 1 of season 3 when we talked about the film Bulworth and compared it to Network. He was Rasta Man. You got to be a spirit. You can't be no ghost. Remember that?
Of course.
Now, before he was known as Amiri Baraka, he was called Leroy Jones. So some of his books include, published as Leroy Jones, include Preface to a 20-volume Suicide Note, which I think was probably the first thing I ever read by him, or, an excerpt thereof. I think I encountered it in like a junior college introductory literary class. So,
Nice.
How about you? When was the first time you encountered his work?
Interestingly, I think my one and really only prolonged encounter was with the text that we're going to look at today. I was in a creative writing class at U of A, and I may have been the student who introduced this poem to the class, or somebody else did. I can't remember. But I remember it being kind of like, pretty cutting edge. I think it was a week where we all brought in poems that we liked rather than us just workshopping that day. So I may have come across it through the website okplayer.com, which I used to spend a lot of time on, which is had some message boards, and it's mainly a hip hop based community. So someone may have posted the poem, and yeah. So I remember the refrain very distinctly. I won't get into the poem too much at this point, but yeah, it's cool that you chose this particular poem because it's the one poem by him that I really knew. I will just mention one play as well that he's known for in that Leroy Jones period, which is Dutchman. Have you read that?
I'm glad you mentioned that because, the next slide features some of his other works. There's Blues People, Negro Music in White America, which I've not read, but it looks great.
Apparently, it's the most cited text, by the way. Kind of in the larger scholarly community.
Yeah, and then next to that is an image of a paperback, which includes Dutchman and The Slave, couple of his plays. There's also a play called Slave Ship, which
I was reading about that today.
I haven't read any of the plays, but those definitely look like texts that would be worth exploring later.
My colleague,
have you
Greg,
seen The Dutchman or read it?
Just casually chatting about Baraka with my colleague Greg, who contributed to our Othello podcast. Yeah, he said he read The Dutchman at age 19, and it was kind of one of those whoa texts, that kind of eye-opening. Maybe something similar for him that Malcolm X was for me, like the autobiography of. So I think it's very powerful and probably shocking to some extent. I want to read it, but I fear it would be really, really, I don't know what the right word is, but
provocative,
over the top, maybe provocative. Yeah, provocative,
transgressive.
transgressive. Yes,
All the more reason to read it.
potentially. Although some of the stuff with some of the quotes I've read about how a white woman, could feel privileged in a way to be raped. That's not an exact quote, but I think he was saying some stuff at that time that, I wouldn't.
He's been
endorse.
accused of he's been accused of misogyny and, as we'll find out later, anti-Semitism as well,
and homophobia.
Right. Well, here's an interesting slide. Do you want to read the quote from the autobiography of Leroy Jones, Amiri Baraka, published in 1984? First of all, who's in the picture there?
It's our boy Allen Ginsberg.
There you go.
With hair.
Right.
I did come across a cool video clip, which was an interview with Ginsberg as well. So it's nice to imagine this particular period in Baraka's career, which was in Greenwich Village, New York, before he decided that Black nationalism was calling him to Harlem. But yeah, I'd like to read this. I took up with the beats because that's what I saw taking off and flying and somewhat resembling myself. The open and implied rebellion of form and content, aesthetic as well as political. I could see the young white boys and girls in their pronouncement of disillusion and removal from society as being related to the Black experience. That made us colleagues of the spirit.
Yeah, so he was palling around with Ginsberg and Kerouac and this guy as well. Do you know who it is?
Nope. Tell me.
Hubert Selby Jr., known to his friends as Cubby. I recently learned. Oh, yeah? No, not the same guy.
Okay.
Well, I recently learned, not that recently, actually, I saw this documentary a couple of years ago, a Hubert Selby Jr. documentary. He was friendly with Amiri Baraka and they did smack together, but apparently, Amiri Baraka or Leroy Jones or Roy Jones or whatever he was called at that time was very much a casual user, whereas Cubby, Hubert Selby Jr. was a full-on junkie. I've got some of his great books here in my library. You can see them.
Sorry, so who is this guy? I don't know.
I don't know if you can see them. Oh, he's the author of Last Exit to Brooklyn, most famously.
Okay. I've seen that cover many times.
But he also wrote Requiem for a Dream. I think you're a fan of that film, right?
If one can be a fan of it, yeah.
Yeah. And then he also wrote The Demon. That's a great book. And what else do we have here? The Room.
Nice.
So yeah, I've become quite the Hubert Selby Jr. fan in the past few years, but I was surprised to see Amiri Baraka in the Hubert Selby Jr. documentary called, I think, It'll Be Better Tomorrow, narrated by Robert Downey Jr. of all people. And it
is the film version of Requiem pretty faithful to that book? Just curious side note.
I think so. I saw the film a long time ago and read the novel like a couple years ago. It's my least favorite of those 4 books, so I wasn't really focused on comparing it to the film. But
just because the film felt very contemporary. So I'm just...
Yeah, well, he
wrote it recently, huh?
What's the date on Requiem for a Dream? I don't think it's that recent. 78 is when it was first published, I think. But yeah, if you're gonna read his stuff, I suggest you start with Last Exit to Brooklyn. To me, that's his masterpiece of those four. But The Demon is also great. The Room is very good.
What is
And
it very
Requiem is worth reading.
What is it very basically about?
Which Last Exit to Brooklyn?
Yeah.
Ginsberg speaks highly of it, by the way. He says this will still be read 100 years from now. I mention this because, Hubert Selby Jr. was friendly with some of the beats. I think they helped him get published, so that's probably how he ended up connecting with Amiri Baraka. It's a collection of stories, really. It's a novel, but they're distinct narratives. Sometimes the characters of one story might appear in another, but it's really a loosely connected story collection. But it includes like The Queen is Dead, which is about a transsexual and was the inspiration for the Smiths album The Queen is Dead. There's also
and
a
it's
movie.
realistic. Is it set in Brooklyn?
Yeah. I mean, it's just about ordinary working people, junkies, transsexuals.
Right.
Yeah, I highly
I was
recommend
hooked when you said transsexual.
Yeah, I'm sure. Also highly influential on David Bowie, that book in particular. Anyway, this is not about Hubert Selby Jr., but I thought I would promote him since there is a connection. Intertextuality. Let's see. So you sent me this, and I'll let you read it. It's a little snippet called "Revolutionary Art," apparently taken from one of Amiri Baraka's works.
Okay. Revolutionary art. Black art, in the sense that we first used it, meant not only an art that was an expression of black life, but revolutionary art. The theater we spoke of was revolutionary theater, a theater that was black by color in that it was created by black people, black by culture in that it was an expression of African culture, but also black in terms of its consciousness, that it wanted to create a political statement that would benefit black people. A theater that is revolutionary in that it seeks to transform reality, revolutionary in that it is a weapon in the arsenal of world revolution. And here we begin to come into conflict with the definitions of art given by Europeans. The ability to define, of course, is the ability to control. Who defines, controls. The person who defines is the person who has the power. Definitions are made with guns. The persons with the most guns give out the most definitions. So essentially, European art is simply a manifestation of European consciousness in all that contains.
Any comment on that?
Well, I guess it just speaks to the next epoch in Baraka's development. We mentioned the Beat period, and from that point, especially spurred on by the deaths of Malcolm and Martin, as Cornel West referred to them.
Brother Malcolm and Brother Martin.
Yeah, he felt perhaps that the coffee shop beat culture no longer electrified him, and that he suddenly felt the exigence, if that's a word, of black nationalism. And so that was a really key label for him for the next, I don't know, 10, 20 years before he kind of maybe did a arguably similar transition as Malcolm did when he embraced Islam. But for Amiri, it wasn't necessarily Islam that pushed him forward, but just a more universal Marxist perspective, which was more forgiving of white people, basically. But yeah, I think that the more interesting and powerful part of this little excerpt is that second paragraph, obviously. So discussing what art means and what role it should play, and challenging our traditional ideas of art and its role in society. What about you?
Well, I like the discussion of definitions. Who
Right.
defines, controls? Definitions are made with guns.
Right.
The ability to define is the ability to control. I think there's definitely something to that. So related to that Black nationalism phase, perhaps, is this picture, which you also sent. Why don't you describe what we see here?
Sure. I'll just read the caption, but it's Maya Angelou dancing with Baraka over the ashes. Wasn't exactly sure what that meant. Was that literal ashes, or is this some kind of commemorative plaque of the poet Langston Hughes at the New York Public Library's Schomburg Center for Research in Black Culture? But just a really cool image, the way Baraka's knees are kind of bent as they're jiving, and just to see this concentration of black genius, I guess, is very cool. It's very cool.
Well, I assumed that was his literal ashes. I don't know the details, but it sounds to me like he's like he's buried under the floor of the library there.
Okay.
I mean, that's how I read it. I don't know if that's true, but I don't know why else they would have described it like that.
Yeah.
So, yeah, interesting picture. Now, you also sent this article about Glenn Ford. Well, it was by Glenn Ford about Amiri Baraka's support of Obama from 2008 on, and then he later turned against Obama. But Glenn Ford's critique was that it was too little, too late. He enabled, Obama's rise to power, and he was like a left attack dog to prevent leftist criticism of Obama. Anything you want to say about that?
Well, I guess there's a small space for forgiveness in terms of the first 4 years of Obama's reign, right? Like, as a Black American, yeah, I still think it's somewhat naive and narrow-sighted to have endorsed Obama even the first time around, although I was definitely on board with Obama first time around. But at the same time, I would say I was a lot less enlightened at that time, or than I perceive myself to be now, about reality of political power.
I remember.
But yeah, I mean, I don't think like the shaming that he was doing was justified.
At that time, you were upset with me for attacking Hillary Clinton, so I
really?
remember.
Please,
yeah,
don't say that on record.
Yeah,
this is gonna survive.
We should point out that Glenn Ford is the journalist who well, he was the long time. He's now passed away, but he was the long time editor of Black Agenda Report, and always a very sharp analyst and critic of American society and culture and politics, black culture and politics. So, his point is that Amiri Baraka should have known better. I mean, he did, and I'm sure that the staff at Black Agenda Report did as well. Margaret Kimberly was probably sounding the warnings as
yeah, and I think that's
Mr. Ford
as I said, I think that's
was.
No, go ahead. I think that's the most disappointing part of Ford's article. Is it's one thing to maybe have said, okay, I support Obama, but then to kind of take this really self-righteous and malicious position towards critics, that's pretty ugly. I mean, but I mean, that's part of Baraka, right? I mean, if we're going to embrace Baraka today in our pod, we're embracing someone who we don't necessarily co-sign everything that they've done, but we hope that they expressed all their views honestly and in good faith.
Yeah. It's always going to be provocative and challenging in some way, even, as you say, when we disagree. All right, so I thought this was interesting as background too, since it relates to the particular piece that we're looking at. I'll read this. It says, in July 2002, Baraka was named Poet Laureate of New Jersey by Governor Jim McGreevey. I wonder if he was Republican or Democrat. I'm guessing Democrat. The position
I think
was
Republican,
to be for,
surprisingly. But anyway, sorry.
Okay. The position was to be for 2 years and came with a $10,000 stipend. Baraka held the post for a year, during which time he was mired in controversy, including substantial political pressure and public outrage demanding his resignation. During the Geraldine R. Dodge Poetry Festival in Stanhope, New Jersey, Baraka read his 2001 poem on September 11th attacks, Somebody Blew Up America, which was criticized for anti-Semitism and attacks on public figures. Oh no, he attacked public figures? Heaven forbid. Because there was no mechanism in the law to remove Baraka from the post, and he refused to step down. That's hilarious. The position of State Poet Laureate was officially abolished by the state legislature and Governor McGreevey. So he's appointed Poet Laureate of the state of New Jersey. Fair play to New Jersey for having a Poet Laureate. I wonder if Texas does. I rather doubt it. But so he's appointed, Poet Laureate. They probably think they're doing something to promote diversity, equity, and inclusion. But then he reads this controversial poem, and that's just a step too far. So I think he was attacked by the ADL, the Anti-Defamation League, and accused of anti-Semitism, which I think is bullshit. And then attacks on public figures. What? You can't criticize, the Bush administration, which is, several Bush cabinet members are targeted for criticism in the poem. Hilariously, I might add. I mean, it's brilliant satire.
He was a Democrat, by the way. I fact-checked that.
Yeah.
And not that it matters. And
not that it matters at all.
Right. And as far as the anti-Semitism charge, I mean, we'll get into that in more detail later, but while he may have held some internalized anti-Semitic views, this particular poem, for it to be charged with anti-Semitism is a bit laughable, considering the references that he makes to the Holocaust, and he seems to sympathize with Jewish struggle,
Of course,
at least
of
at that
course.
time, in the poem. I mean,
His first wife was Jewish, if I'm not mistaken. So
she was, but one of the reasons he gives for leaving her is that, he kind of felt like he was with the enemy. So I don't know if that's a credit to his tolerance. Let's that one.
Yeah, that's my comment. All right. Well, as we get into the actual poem, this image of the owl and its relation to the question, which is repeated throughout. It's one of the refrains. Who? WHO.
Who?
Yeah. So there's a connection made between the somebody blew up America, right? Well, who was it? And then that who becomes who, the hooting of an owl. So these connections are emphasized in the oral version that we're going to try to listen to today, if the video will work properly.
Great.
So let's think about that image of the owl as we read this and its relation to the question of who.
And its
also,
relation to mythological representations of the owl representing wisdom, whether we're talking about Athena, or is it right that it's the same Minerva?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's
Roman...
that's her Roman form.
Right. Okay.
Yeah. Well, let's save that for
Sure.
when we get to it. But I'll just point out also that in this version that we're listening to, the background music, and it is a performance. It's like a jazz spoken word performance. There's a guy playing saxophone as Amiri Baraka reads, and he tells us in one version, in one video version, that the background music is Thelonious Monk's Mysterioso. So that's what we're hearing in the background.
It's great. It's fantastic backing, very eerie and discordant. And the spoken word quality. I mean, I think Baraka can definitely be seen as a predecessor to slam poetry, which really blew up in the 90s. So if you think about someone like Saul Williams, or even people like Mos Def and Def Poetry Jam in general, Baraka was, he was already delivering poetry with that kind of elocution years before. So props to him for...
Well, and we can still, I think, discern the influence of the beats in Somebody Blew Up America, right? I mean, wouldn't you say?
Absolutely. And this poem, I mean, if we think about the who and we think about the owl, it's not really too many steps away from howl. It's its own version of howl.
It's just one letter away, isn't it?
Exactly.
Owl and howl.
And it's a similar kind of shrieking and crying out, demanding answers.
Yeah, and I mean, I would say the direct political rhetoric. Well, I'm just thinking of poets like Neruda, as I always do. I love me some Neruda. So I'm reminded of that as well. Neruda also uses satire to lampoon the, absurdities of conservative, right-wing, fascistic culture and political ideologies. So,
although it is interesting that you've invoked this idea of satire. We can talk about that more later, but I've been thinking about satire this week, and I don't know, this feels a little bit too kind of raw in tone and too visceral in tone for me in terms of how I would traditionally think of satire. Like for me, satire is a lot more kind of like wry and humorous.
No, not necessarily. It might be Swiftian satire. It might be Juvenalian satire. You know, it's
right.
vicious. It's vicious and pointed. It's not like Horatian satire, which is supposed to be smiling satire. This is
okay.
very
I mean,
sarcastic.
I just think of like The Onion is still making really great points all the time, but it's not nearly as like pointed. And even if we think about this incantation that we're about to hear, it's like this feels direct in a sense. That's all I'm saying, in a way that satire might be kind of more ironic.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know. You can
Well, let's see
develop that
if we find it to be overtly satirical or not. I think I will, but we'll see. So what we want to try to do is just play the performance from the beginning, and we'll just stop whenever we have something to say. Let's see how that will work.
Somebody blew up America. All thinking people oppose terrorism, both domestic and international. But one should not be used to cover the other. Somebody blew up America. They say it's some terrorist, some barbaric Arab in Afghanistan. It wasn't our American terrorists. It wasn't the Klan or the skinheads or the them that blows up nigger churches or reincarnates us on death row. It wasn't Trent Lott or David Duke or Giuliani or Schindler. Helms retiring.
You can already hear audience members laughing, right? So they get the jokes, the satire.
It wasn't the gonorrhea in costume, the white sheet diseases that have murdered black people, terrorized reason and sanity, most of humanity, as they pleases. They say, who say? Who do the saying? Who is them paying? Who tell the lies? Who in disguise? Who had the slaves? Who got the bucks out the bucks?
So the refrain of who begins here and begins to build throughout. Anything you want to say? I see you bobbing your head and feeling the
that's the thing I want to say, I guess. Just that it's so musical and it's so much more enjoyable to listen to than just to read. Because it grooves hard.
I agree. Who got the bucks out the bucks?
Yeah.
That's great. All right, let's keep going. Stop me.
Who got fat from plantations? Who genocided
say.
Indians, tried to waste the black nation? Who live on Wall Street, the first plantation? Who cut your nuts off? Who raped your mom? Who lynched your pa? Who got the tar? Who got the feathers? Who had the match? Who set the fires? Who killed and hired? Who say they God? Still be the devil. Who the biggest only? Who the most goodest? Who do Jesus resemble? Who created everything? Who the smartest? Who the greatest? Who the richest? Who say you ugly and they the good lookingest? Who define art? Who define science? Who
there's those definitions, right?
Right.
Who define art, who define science.
I guess the only other thing I'll add is some of the criticism I read today was like referring to what it referred to as like grammatical mistakes, but which then it would like say, oh, but he's saying the black vernacular. Or I don't know. I just didn't like the way that these critiques were focusing on correct versus incorrect rather than just stylized.
Of course, that's absurd.
Yeah, so yeah, I would just say that those moments where he goes against grammatical convention, that's just flavor. That's all it is.
Good lookingest? That's amazing.
Yeah, totally.
Who say you ugly and they the good lookingest? I mean, that's brilliant. That's like, that reminds me of E.E. Cummings' Unbeautiful, The Cambridge ladies who live in furnished souls are unbeautiful and have comfortable minds.
Yeah, and I don't think that we have to even say that, oh, this is like Ebonics or something. I wouldn't say it's that. I'd say it's just
poetry.
It's poetry and it's flavor.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Let's carry on.
Who made the bombs? Who made the guns?
Going.
Who bought the slaves? Who sold them? Who call you them names? Who say Dahmer wasn't insane? Who? Who stole Puerto Rico? Who stole the Indies, the Philippines, Manhattan, Australia, and the Hebrides? Who forced opium on the Chinese? Who owned them buildings? Who got the money? Who think you funny? Who lock you up? Who owned the papers? Who owned the slave ship?
There's Slave Ship, the title of one of his plays. And at this point, I'm asking the question, who indeed, like, who is this somebody? And, well,
yeah, I mean, the role of rhetorical question is just massive. And it's answered and not answered, but it's just the power of, I mean, should we save that for a little bit later, or do you want to jump in right now just to the power of the who?
Well, maybe so, but it's like in the beginning he sets up who it's not, right? They say it's some terrorist, some barbaric Arab in Afghanistan.
Right.
Right? But is that who really blew up America?
Right.
Like, even if you don't consider blowback as the ultimate cause, even if you accept the official version and it's just the result of blowback, that's one thing, but maybe he's saying he doesn't even accept that. It was forces within the U.S. government which conspired maybe with those other somebodies, but that's the who, right? It's like, who killed JFK? Who?
And for me, it's like the specific answer isn't as crucial as questioning the official narrative.
Yeah.
Right? Like, and the question here is the transgression. Like, you're asking the questions that are not allowed to be asked, but as soon as you are asked, you realize that it's not what you're being told, and that's as simple as it. That's the basic thing. It's that it's not what you're being told. For me,
yeah.
Who run the army? Who was the fake president? Who the ruler? Who the banker? Who the devil on the real side? Who got rich from Armenian genocide? Who the biggest terrorist? Who changed the Bible? Who killed the most people? Who do the most evil?
Can we
Who
pause?
don't worry about survival?
Mm-hmm.
Just a quick note to say that in the version we've been looking at from Genius, Baraka skips a pretty considerable section, which, he absolutely has the right to, but there's some kind of critical lines in that section. One stanza in particular reads, "Who killed the most niggers? Who killed the most Jews? Who killed the most Italians? Who killed the most Irish? Who killed the most Africans? Who killed the most Japanese? Who killed the most Latinos? Who owned the ocean? Who owned the airplanes? Who owned the malls? Who owned television? Who owned radio? Who owned what ain't even known to be owned? Who owned the owners that ain't the real owners?" So that's like a little clip that I thought was like really crucial.
I think he includes some of that, but yeah, there are definitely alternative versions out there. Maybe he revised it as he went, and he published it in one form, and then when he did performances, he added and cut certain sections.
It could even just be a timing issue, like he was matching with this saxophone and it just didn't maybe fit as comfortably.
Yeah, you can see him pause and sort of get into a rhythm as he's listening to the music. And at one point
I should note that it is a white devil on the saxophone.
Yeah, it is. And at one point he even encourages the white devil to speed up the tempo, maybe. All right, let's carry on.
Who have the colonies?
Okay.
Who stole the most land? Who rule the world? Who say they good but only do evil? Who the biggest executioner? Who? Who own the oil? Who want more oil? Who told you what you think that later you find out is a lie? Who found Bin Laden? Maybe they Satan. Who paid the CIA? Who knew the bomb was gonna blow? Who know where the terrorists learned to fly in Florida and San Diego? Who knew why 5 Israelis was filming the explosion and cracking their sides at the notion?
Okay, so this is probably where the charge of anti-Semitism comes from, but this is a thing,
and other
man.
charges.
Yeah, but this is this is an actual thing. There's documented evidence of these so-called dancing Israelis that were interviewed on Israeli television, admitted that they even told the FBI apparently that they were sent by Mossad to film the events. So something very suspicious happened with those Israeli nationals.
I mean, I did follow up one of those articles. It was published by, what is the publication called? Havertz. Sorry, Haaretz. Yeah, Havertz is a football player from my Arsenal team. Haaretz, which continues to do pretty strong journalism right now, I should add, during this tragic time in Gaza.
Well, that's the point. Things that are questioned in Israeli media about Israel, like they talk about it openly in their society, but American society is more censored than Israeli society about Israeli issues. It's crazy. But what did you find?
Yeah, well, just that article showed that a group of people were taping and reacting, but it seemed to me that those same people were then arrested, strip searched, interrogated. So if they really were protected by Mossad, why would they have to undergo that kind of treatment?
Did they stay in prison or were they sent back to Israel? That's the question. They were picked up.
Okay. Yeah.
They were picked up because it was so egregious and they were interrogated, and then they were told, "Oh, these guys are above your pay grade," like what Alex Acosta was told when he was trying to prosecute Epstein. So
Mm-hmm.
they didn't languish in an American prison. They were sent back to Israel. I believe they actually told the FBI, "Oh, we're with Mossad," and they're like, "Oh, all right, we're Mossad assets." I mean, they had a front group and like a shell company in Brooklyn or somewhere. So very suspicious things took place, and he's alluding to that. And
I think we should emphasize that. Well, just like he's kind of buying himself some rhetorical security. I don't know if I'm articulating that correctly, but by framing everything in questions, he's just asking the questions. He's not saying, but he's just saying this stuff is out there. It's worth maybe considering. Doesn't necessarily mean that he's 100% co-signing.
Yeah, true. It's like all of these things need to be investigated. I'm just asking questions, as you say. We're not allowed to ask questions,
right?
And are the questions I'm asking absurd? Maybe so, but there's reason to be suspicious, and so I don't believe anything I'm told. So all of these so-called conspiracies should be investigated.
Right, and we were having a mini discussion on WhatsApp earlier, sponsored by Meta, just about one critic I was reading saying that this poem, even though this critic didn't agree with a lot of the more provocative statements in the poem, but that he did acknowledge that it reflected the collapse of the historical archive in the public consciousness, so that reasonable people or educated people, we no longer have a stable archive to turn to and kind of base and get a reasonable conception of history. Do you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, because the official narrative is such obvious bullshit that we have no alternative but to consider the alternative, right? Like
Right.
The official line is such obvious nonsense. It's so clearly a lie and a cover-up that all these other theories must be considered.
I want to really quickly, one little funny anecdote. I'm going to change names to protect the youth.
Who get the biggest tax cut?
But so I'm teaching Fahrenheit 451 right now, and I gave my students the task of creating a comic book representing the society of Fahrenheit. And of course, my student, will give him the name Dima, started dicking around on this comic book website, and he's like a really bright kid, very rebellious, but he's only like 12 years old. But the first comic slide or panel that he made, he drew the Twin Towers and two airplanes going towards it. And then the next slide that he made, he just like duplicated soldiers until there was like 30 soldiers, and then he did a speech bubble, and it says, "We found oil." And it's funny because in that moment as a teacher, I'm like, I want him to get on task, and at the other time I just can't help but like laugh at the poignant and like hilarious political satire that's going on in front of me. So it's a funny moment to be an educator in a situation like that. Yeah, anyway.
Who walked out of the conference against racism? Who killed Malcolm, Kennedy, and his brother? Who killed Dr. King? Who would want such a thing? Are they linked to the murder of Lincoln?
I love that wordplay there. Are they linked to the murder of Lincoln?
I didn't catch that, yeah.
Who invaded Grenada? who made money from apartheid, who keep the Irish a colony, who overthrew Chile and Nicaragua later, who killed David Sebeco, Chris Hani, the same ones who killed Biko, Cabral, Neruda, Allende, Che Guevara, Sandino, who killed Kabila, the
There's Neruda.
Yeah, exactly.
ones who wasted Lumumba, Manlane, Betty Shabazz, Princess Di, Ralph Featherstone.
What do you think about that one? Princess Di.
I would just say that it just kind of adds to that river of stuff that's going on here, you know, like it's a sequence without necessarily all of them having the same legitimacy. It's just about questioning again official narratives.
Yeah.
So there's reasons to think that the official narrative surrounding Princess Di,
Something suspicious
is wrong.
there. Yeah, something
Right.
suspicious.
And do you have anything about that besides?
Well, I've not investigated that, but yeah, wasn't there like a high-speed car chase or something, and she's with her lover? I mean,
well, her father, I can't remember his name, but he's an influential Arab. Yeah, he accused MI5 of his father, the guy's her lover's father.
Right.
Yeah, he accused MI5 of setting it up.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Wouldn't
Mohammed
surprise me.
Al-Fayed.
Wouldn't surprise me.
Little Bobby,
MI6, by the way.
locked up Mandela, Deruba, Geronimo, Asada, Mumia, Garba, Yashil Hammett, Althea Sutton.
Dashiell Hammett, the mystery writer, Maltese Falcon. I think he was a communist sympathizer. He and his
fucking communist
partner, Lillian Hellman, I believe.
Who killed Huey Newton, Fred Hampton, Medgar Evers, Mikey Smith, Walter Rodney? Was it the ones who tried to poison Fidel?
CIA.
Who tried to keep the Vietnamese oppressed? Who put a price on Lenin's head? Who put the Jews in ovens? And who helped them do it? Who said America first and okayed the yellow stars?
Great questions. And,
yeah, absolutely.
And, you know, you're gonna say he's anti-Semitic after that. His whole point is, you know, the Holocaust wouldn't have taken place without the cooperation of people like, I don't know, Henry Ford and, you know, American corporations like IBM and and I think the Bush crime family, you know, Prescott Bush was he would have been indicted for consorting with the enemy for all his Nazi connections.
And I think it's interesting to, I mean, there's probably not a direct connection to be made between corporations and like the specific ideology of the Nazi Party, but true to his Marxist stance, like he sees the Nazi Party as just a manifestation of capitalism, and an opportunity to make money and fuel the war machine. So that's a pretty strong allegation.
Yeah, the same forces or I don't know, incentives which led to slavery. You know, slavery, war, the Holocaust. Some of the same forces are at play. Let's see here.
Who killed Rosa Luxemburg, Liebknecht? Who murdered the Rosenbergs? And all the good people iced, tortured, assassinated, vanished? Who got rich from Algeria, Libya, Haiti, Iran, Iraq, Saudi, Kuwait, Lebanon, Syria, Egypt, Jordan, Palestine. Who cut off people's hands in the Congo? Who invented AIDS? Who put the germs in the Indian?
That's an interesting one. Who invented AIDS? But then well, let it play. There's a line after that, which is good.
Blankets.
Did you catch that one? Who put the germs in the Indians' blankets?
Yeah, I mean, I'm following along with the text, so yeah.
That was like, one of the first examples of germ warfare. So is AIDS, and for that matter, COVID, are they
Whoa. Sorry.
Yeah. Forget about all those biolabs that actually make that shit. Forget about the anthrax that was clearly produced in the U.S. and found its way to all those senators' offices by way of the U.S. mail.
Who thought up the Trail of Tears? Who blew up the Maine and started the Spanish-American War? Who got Sharon back in power? Who backed Batista, Hitler, Bilbo, Chiang Kai-shek? Who?
Chiang Kai-shek, father of Taiwan.
I just don't understand, like, why he's got to call out Bilbo, though, Because, like, for me, Bilbo's a heroic figure.
Who is Bilbo?
So I'm being really stupid here with, like, the Bilbo Baggins. Sorry.
No, that guy. Who is the reference?
I don't know.
We'll look that up and put it in the show notes.
Okay.
I just pointed out, though, Chiang Kai-shek is the father of Taiwan. That old pirate.
Well, really
from
quickly,
the mainland.
too, yeah. I had this awkward moment where you continued when I was about to say something before, which is fine.
Mm-hmm.
But
sorry.
The little side note I was going to add is in that list of countries that he gives, who got rich from, blah, blah, blah. It's worth maybe noting that Obama's bombing in Libya is what actually turned Baraka's support, it was a key factor.
Mm-hmm.
And also, we should maybe note that today, February 3rd, 2024, it was 2 days ago that the U.S. dropped bombs on more than 80, I believe, sites in Iraq and Syria. So, the Middle
Happy
Eastern
anniversary.
Yeah, it's crazy. Like, it's crazy. Absolutely crazy.
Who decided affirmative action had to go? Reconstruction, the New Deal, the New Frontier, the Great Society. Who do Tom S. Clarence work for?
That's hilarious, man.
Yeah.
Tom ass Clarence.
I just got that now. I was thinking like Uncle Tom stuff.
Well, I think so.
Yeah, that's right.
I
but
think
like
that's
the Tom ass
the
is
point
funny
of the
too.
Tom. Yeah, Tom ass. Yeah. And here come the satirical references to certain members of the Bush cabinet.
Who do come out the colon's mouth? Who know what kind of skeezer is a Condoleezza?
Audible laughter from the audience there. So all of these are like members of what I think Glenn Ford called the Black Misleadership class.
Who paid Connolly to be a wooden Negro? Who give genius awards to Homo locus subsidiary? Who overthrew Nkrumah, Bishop? Who poisoned Robeson? Who tried to put Du Bois in jail? Who framed Rap Jamil Alameen? Who framed the Rosenbergs, Garvey, the Scottsboro Boys, the Hollywood 10? Who set the Reichstag fire?
One of the original 9/11s.
Who knew the World Trade Center was going to get bombed? Who told 4,000 Israeli workers at the Twin Towers to stay home that day?
Now this is interesting. I don't know that I've heard this particular conspiracy theory.
That's that one's pretty out there.
Well, but there were people, I don't know if they were Israeli nationals, but some people did stay away, right? Like some people did seem to have advanced knowledge of it.
Why did Sharon stay away? Who?
There's his stage direction.
Who? Explosion of owl, the newspapers say. Devil's face could be seen. Explosion of owl, the newspapers say the devil's face could be seen. Who?
So there's the owl. Something you want to say about that?
I'm hoping there's something you want to say about that, because, or we can try and dissect that a little bit together, because it's a bit enigmatic for me what exactly he means there.
Let's let him continue.
Who make money from war? Who make dough from fear and lies? Who want the world like it is? Who want the world to be?
That's an interesting question. Who want the world like it is? Like, think about who is satisfied with the status quo and who wants change, right? Like, it's
Absolutely.
so obvious, but it's a question we don't often consider, right? Like, who clamors for change and who's like, no, everything's fine.
Right.
I mean, it's obvious. The privileged want to maintain the status quo. Yeah, they don't want change. Everything's good. Everything's fine. Don't change anything. So,
I mean, even some of us more stable folk, we're like, we want the economy to stay stable, but I definitely still consider myself in the haves. Doesn't mean that I want the world to stay as it is, but there's an element of it. And I don't know if this, again, I'll just make a really quick, the who for me is, well, a more satisfying answer for me is not necessarily like the elites, but as I tend to take stuff, it's like everything and all. So I'm more into the like blood's on everyone's hands. Like we're all complicit, maybe to different proportions though.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think this poem would necessarily disagree with what you're saying. Like, I think that's a valid analysis. Reminds me in a way of the Rolling Stones' "Sympathy for the Devil." I shouted out, "Who killed the Kennedys?" And after all, it was you and me.
Ruled by imperialism and national oppression and terror, violence and hunger and poverty. Who is the ruler of hell? Who is the ruler of hell? Who is most powerful? Who ever seen God? But everybody's seen the devil.
Speak of the devil. Sympathy for the devil.
Yeah.
Like an owl exploding in your life, in your brain, in yourself. Like an owl who know the devil all night, all day, if you listen. Like an owl exploding in fire. Like an owl exploding in your life, in your brain, in yourself. Like an owl who know the devil all night, all day, if you listen. Like an owl exploding in fire. We hear the questions rise in terrible flame, like the whistle of a crazy dog. Like the acid vomit of the fire of hell. Who and who and who,
Now, that's just something you don't get when you're reading it on the page, right?
For sure. I mean, and the ending, just the last couple stanzas, they're, in my opinion, like the strongest in the whole poem.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, maybe they can't exist without everything that comes before it. So I'm not trying to treat them as like separate moments of greatness, but they're just it's a fantastic climax.
Yeah, exactly.
And suddenly you go from kind of the more overtly political naming to some more imagery and really exciting imagery. I know that's maybe an odd word to use, but terrible flame like the whistle of a crazy dog, an owl exploding in fire, the acid vomit of the fire of hell. I think when I first read this, I felt that maybe this was a little bit basic in its language. I mean, in these last sections, I thought perhaps they weren't challenging enough, some of these lines, but as I reread and reread, I'm coming to like these images more and more.
Well, because they're so monstrous, it's like an owl exploding in your brain, in yourself, in your life, in your brain, in yourself. It's like all of the questions become this monstrous image of an exploding owl.
Yeah, it's like when your mind is blown just from realizing that the official narratives are so wrong, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's one way of thinking about that.
Yeah.
Yeah, so do we want to like maybe dig into the owl concept a little bit more? And
well, what else do you want to say about it? You had made the association with Athena and Minerva, which is, perfectly valid, but to me it's just a kind of monstrosity or grotesquerie, and again I'm reminded of Neruda, who often has these absurd images of, for example, La United Fruit Company uh, being created when Jehovah blows his trumpet at the beginning of the world. It's such an absurd image. Maybe this classical or biblical image is being satirized to lampoon the excesses of capitalism and imperialism, and maybe this classical image of Minerva's owl is being appropriated and transformed and made monstrous and grotesque for the same purpose.
well, what do you think about the kind of earlier stanza where it says, explosion of owl, the newspapers say, the devil face could be seen? I get the devil face could be seen. I don't know if you looked up that annotation or maybe you already picked up on it, but it is pretty startling that in the smoke covering the buildings of 9/11, you can see this, like, this face, which is
I've not seen that.
pretty. Yeah, okay. I will
Send
link
me
you that image.
I'll put that in the show notes.
And
well, that would be part of the official narrative, right? Like, oh, see, something satanic happened to our city on the hill, and
right,
we need to, as the holy godly nation, we need to exact revenge. We need to avenge God's people.
what do you think it means, the explosion of owl, the newspapers say?
Well, I assume that's referencing this devil face that you say was appeared in a photograph.
Okay, but I mean, so owl would represent the devil?
I think the exploding owl is his image, but it's because it's so grotesque and horrifying. There's something evil and otherworldly and maybe satanic about it, which is associated with the official, officially interpreted image of the smoke, which you say was interpreted as a devil's face, a satanic face.
I guess I'm just saying owl. I mean, not that we need to reduce it, but we see the owl as something kind of positive if we're talking about the force of questioning. Even the owl that's exploding in your brain, I think that's something he would see as as healthy. It's like wisdom blowing up, right? So I just didn't get why the newspaper would say. I mean, maybe I'm trying to trying to find too literal of a meaning here, but
well, you're interpreting it different from me, I think, because I'm reading it more as, and I hadn't thought of the wisdom connection so much. I always just thought of it as a grotesque image, inspired by the word "who" and its elongated form "who." But let's say it does represent image, right? Well, it does represent wisdom, rather. So what's happening? Wisdom's being destroyed when it's blown up. Not there's an explosion of wisdom and people are becoming enlightened, but rather the wisdom, the even common sense or dialogue or philosophical speculation, all that's been blown up by these horrific events, like exploded in a negative sense, not like blowing up, with a positive connotation.
I don't know. For me, it's still positive. It's like the owl is the questioning of the bullshit.
Like the acid vomit of the fire of hell?
Well, we hear the questions rise in like the whistle of a crazy dog. So it's just like, it can't be, this cannot be, right? Who? I don't know.
Both and, baby. It's horrible and
yeah.
it's cathartic.
Right.
Yeah. Well, let's wrap this up since we're over an hour here. What's the next text?
Yeah, the next text is going to be your high school friend group. And basically, I want us to talk about our own friendships when we were teenagers, how deep those connections felt or not deep. Obviously, every person is going to have such an individual experience, but it's the nostalgic part of me coming out and thinking about how friendships at that time in my life were so intense and romantic and compared to what I have now. And as part of that is because I lived the expat experience. So I think I haven't had a chance to have close proximity with people for a really long period of time. But, I've almost completely lost in touch with my high school friends. I'm still in casual contact with some university friends, but it's very hard to kind of maintain a real connection because of time zone and location. I'm very grateful for the connections I do have, like with you and some other people, who've managed to transcend, but, we don't hang out physically. And so we could reflect on how friendship has changed in modern times, but also just what it means to be a friend in your teenage days, and a lot of places we can go with that. And yeah,
well,
I hope we can get some good content out of that.
As a high school dropout, I can't tell you how excited I am to approach that
Well,
topic.
that's why I caveated it with teenage friendships.
Mm-hmm.
So we can be inclusive to our high school dropouts in the audience.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's see. What else do we need to say? Yeah. Thanks for listening, everyone. Don't forget to follow us on Substack. I'm at markwillwright.substack.com. Tomek's at tomekb.substack.com. And we'll try to get this video up on my YouTube channel. That's at Mark Will Wright, WRITE. So,
and a quick shout out to my friend Rich for contributing some really badass graphics for the show in past weeks, and hopefully that will continue as well.
Yes, thank you, Rich. All right, so we'll be back soon with Season 3, Episode 4. This has been Season 3, Episode 3. Our text was Amiri Baraka's Somebody Blew Up America. Hoo, hoo, hoo.
Hoo!